In 1991, Sega announced it was releasing the Mega CD in Japan. This add-on system attached to the 16-bit Mega Drive and gave it massive storage for games, music, and videos. Not only would this allow 16-bit games a new level of presentation, but Sega also added in some new hardware, sprite, and background scaling features that had some exciting possibilities as well. I had already begun importing games at this point, so I was looking at maybe trying to get one for myself at the Japanese launch. The problem was that it retailed for essentially 50,000 yen at the time. Making an imported machine that early cost around $700. That meant no launch Japanese Mega CD for me, but I was still quite taken with the thought of owning one. When Sega announced it was hitting the US market in late 1992 for $300, I just knew it was going to be something special. Did Sega have enough to justify a $300 CD add-on for the Genesis? Let's find out. Initially, the push for the Sega CD had been huge. It was kicked off with a massive commercial campaign that included print and television ads everywhere you looked. You couldn't watch TV or pick up a magazine that Christmas without seeing something about Sega CD. During this blitz of information, Sega chose to focus a huge amount of time on the full motion video abilities of the new platform. Most of the non-full motion video titles were never spoken of, while games like Night Trap soaked up the lion's share of attention. The Sega CD didn't see many games in 1992. Only about a dozen or so games made it out before the end of the year. Luckily, Sega knew the $300 price point meant that it needed a value proposition that would entice would-be buyers, and that came in the form of a huge pack-in bundle of games. The first of these games was Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. As the name implies, it's a series of mysteries you must solve, starring the famous Private Eye. These mysteries are set up sort of like an adventure game where you must look for clues, talk to persons of interest, and evaluate clues along the way. As you do this, you are treated to full motion video scenes that play out like a movie. Once you feel you have discovered enough evidence to solve the case, you go in front of a judge who breaks down your findings. It actually wasn't a bad game overall, but it definitely fell short in replay value. Once you solved the 3 available cases, that was pretty much it. It was a port of the game that originated on the FM Towns, and aside from a drop-in color, is relatively faithful. Sega Classics Arcade Collection was a compilation of well-known games that had already been released on the Sega Genesis. You got Streets of Rage, Revenge of Shinobi, Columns, and Golden Axe. These games are mostly identical to their cartridge counterparts aside from some audio enhancements here and there. Golden Axe is a CD soundtrack from the arcade, Columns uses an enhanced CD track for the title screen, and both Streets of Rage and Revenge of Shinobi use different sound effects. From there, they are the same great games they'd always been and was a great value for those that didn't own them at the time. Sega could have added some more enhancements to spice them up a bit more, but for pack-in games it was definitely a good bunch. The final pack-in was a port of the Sharp X 68000 horizontal shoot-'em-up, Soul Feast. It featured animated cutscenes, a CD soundtrack, and 6 stages to do battle in. While it was a solid shooter, it didn't really show off the capabilities of the Sega CD beyond voice work and the soundtrack. In fact, around the same time, it was ported to the Sega Genesis as Soul Dees, and remains remarkably similar. It wasn't well received in its day either, with most publications giving it middling reviews and questioning its merits as a showpiece title for Sega's new platform. Sega and Digital Pictures put a lot of effort into trying to sell you software for the Sega CD that weren't actually games. A series of releases known as the Make My Video line featured some popular artists at the time. These had you taking pre-recorded clips and making your own video montage for the song included. Aside from the interactive aspect of putting the clips where you wanted, there were no games here at all. They were among the lowest rated titles you could find at the time, and really gave the Sega CD a bad name. Not all full-motion video games were terrible, but stuff like this definitely didn't help their reputation.
Hello? Hey! Is anybody out there?
Excuse me? Are you awake? You didn't do anything.
Hello? Alright, look. We're gonna give you one more chance. Don't blow it.
Among the launch titles for the Sega CD, you'd be hard-pressed to find something worse than Black Hole Assault from Micronet, the sequel to the much-hated Genesis game Heavy Nova. This is a one-on-one fighter that pits robots against one another across 8 stages. It does have some voice-acted cutscenes and the music isn't terrible, but man is the gameplay rough. The special moves have a gauge that limits their use. You get knocked down with damn near every move, and it only has one punch and one kick button, greatly limiting its moveset. It's the kind of repetitive slog that marred most early fighting games, and one of the reasons why the smoothness in games like Street Fighter II was so appreciated. It's a rough reminder of how far fighting games have come. Wolf Team would do Cobra Command, an early full-motion video title that originally appeared in the arcade on Laserdisc technology from Data East. It was called Thunderstorm in Japan and had you flying an attack helicopter and taking down terrorists at various locations across the globe. The gameplay here was a series of quick-time events strung together one after another. Enemies and obstacles would appear and require you to move a direction or fire your weapons. Make the right move and you'd see more video goodness, but fail and you'd be playing the same scenario over and over again until you got it right. I actually dug this game quite a bit, but it was brutally hard and actually required some serious dedication to see the end. Digital Pictures was responsible for Night Trap, another QuickTime style full-motion video game for the Sega CD. This one added some adventure elements by requiring you to navigate to different rooms and catch augurs, the bad guys of the story. Eventually you'd get a chance to trap the main vampires and save the scantily clad young women who have foolishly fallen into their trap. You actually need to pay attention to the story here and keep up with the code changes and where the characters will be next. Sega focused heavily on this in their advertising and published it as well. Of the initial lineup of video-based software, this was definitely my favorite. It required a bit of exploration and gave you the freedom to move around, something many games of its ilk lacked. While it's no masterpiece, it is intricately tied to the history of the Sega CD platform.
Look, it was your job to protect Kelly and the rest of those girls. From what I've just seen, the place is being overrun. You've missed way too many of those suckers. Until you figure out how to do your job, you're dismissed. Breaking contact.
Sewer Shark was another Digital Pictures title that appeared in those early days for the Sega CD. This one had you co-piloting an underground ship that cleaned up mutated animals. The gameplay here was mostly on-rails shooter-based, but you had to pay attention to the navigator and follow his directions so you could go down the right tunnels. Missing a turn could result in an insta-death as you got deeper in the game. Like Cobra Command, this one is difficult and needs to be replayed quite a bit to get anywhere. Most of the people in this game are verbally abusive, berating you heavily throughout the full-motion video scenes. It was an interesting experience at the time, and I did play it quite a bit, but that steep difficulty quickly turned me to other games for the platform.
Look at those totals, dog meat. They look reconstituted frog slime. I'm shipping you back to flight school. See how you like flying a desk, spud brain.
I found a few different release dates for Old Chuck Rock here. Some places claim late 1992, others early 1993. Either way, I remember the Sega CD port quite well. It was pretty much the Genesis version with a progress map, some voice acting, and a CD soundtrack. Chuck Rock was always a simple game, so I'm not sure what could have been done to make it better. If anything, it kinda set a tone for what was coming for the Sega CD long term. Genesis ports with little in the way of real extras and enhancements. There is nothing here you need over the cartridge release, a case that would come up again and again, unfortunately. Another one that fell under the umbrella of enhanced ports was Hook, an action platformer that was licensed after the movie of the same name. I've always got a kick out of this because it uses different voice actors than what you saw in the film. It pretty much mirrors the cartridge as far as stage design and gameplay otherwise. The main guy is really slow and it plays about as simple as these games get. The John Williams soundtrack is great, but it's yet another Sega CD game where you don't really miss much by playing the Genesis version. Surprisingly, Core Design was responsible for this and Chuck Rock, two games that were as vanilla as they come.
Daddy, is Grandma Wendy the real Wendy?
Maggie, that's ridiculous. Now come on, children. It's way past your bedtime.
Then, Dad, is Peter Pan's adventure a made-up story?
Jack, stop.
I say she is the real Wendy.
Core Design was back again with Wolfchild, yet another action platformer that was an enhanced Sega Genesis release. You run around punching and shooting bad guys in plain 2D environments that the Genesis could do pixel for pixel. Again, it wasn't a bad game, it just didn't do anything really to enhance what you could already play on the base unit. The back of the box even touts the CD quality graphics, but the only thing here the CD was responsible for was some pretty tame animated bits. The actual gameplay can be unbelievably frustrating. It has the type of design where you can spend 10 minutes climbing a level, only to fall back down because of some stupid trap that sends you to the bottom. I was not a fan. Wonder Dog was one of the rare exceptions in those early launch window of games for the Sega CD. It was a traditional 2D platformer you couldn't get on the Genesis and had some great scrolling effects and some killer animated opening cinemas that looked better than anything else on the machine. Unfortunately, that didn't help the simple gameplay, and while this one does have enough to enjoy a few playthroughs, it's not exactly system-selling software. Still, that opening cinema and colorful visuals definitely stood out when there was so little else to play. Someone at Core Design must have had a major investment in the Sega CD because they did this one as well. Prince of Persia was also released for the Sega CD. Based on the Apple II original of the same name, this gives us voice-acted cutscenes and some nice animation. The setup for this one was always a challenge. You are thrown into prison and about to lose the love of your life, and only have one single hour to figure out a way to stop it all. That hour runs out during gameplay. That means no matter how well you do the first time you play, you likely won't make it to the conclusion. This creates quite a bit of replay value based on what you learned in all your previous attempts, until you find the path to victory. Needless to say, you'll die a lot here. The Sega CD release is not to be confused with the Sega Genesis version. They are two different games developed by two different teams. The save game feature of this one was a lifesaver. I wanted to do this episode for a few different reasons. One was to show you what Sega was offering in those early days and weeks for your hard-earned $300 in the United States. The second was to show you just how underutilized that extra hardware in the Sega CD was. And finally, to give you a clearer picture of why the platform had such an incredibly hard time making inroads with Sega Genesis owners. For nearly 2 years before its release, North American Sega fans were hearing all about these great abilities the Sega CD had. It could scale sprites and backgrounds, it had an extra 68,000 CPU that was faster and more capable, it had the storage to give us longer, more interactive levels, and animation to make it all look so much better. Yet when the system arrived, the only new things we saw to get excited about were full motion video titles. Some of those games were actually not as bad as some would have you believe, but they also weren't gonna be high profile system sellers like a great looking traditional title was capable of. These early months for the Sega CD in the US were some rough times, and I honestly believe the reason why the hardware didn't take off. You had a $300 price tag, you had not one single game at the time that showed off its specialized muscle, and even old Sonic was still an entire year away. This made for a hard sell, particularly with the Genesis and Super Nintendo receiving so many high-profile games at the same time. Why in the world would you be excited to get a $300 Sega CD when the Genesis you already owned could play the likes of Streets of Rage 2? With that said, it doesn't mean I do not have fond memories of this time. I enjoyed a few of the full motion video games like Night Trap, and I really enjoyed some of the animated movies and music in some of these games. The sad thing is that not long after this unimpressive launch, the Sega CD really started to get the ball rolling with some great software. Original RPGs started flowing, games started to get some real enhancements as extras, and perhaps most importantly, some high-profile third parties actually got some killer exclusives going you couldn't play on any other US system. I feel the Sega CD had a boatload of potential, but at $300 in that underwhelming launch window software, it never really stood a chance at making big market success. Consumers will buy it if you give them a reason to, but Sega just took too long to get things going. Quite a bit of the most memorable stuff didn't show up until 1994 and 1995, by which time Sega was ready to launch its 32-bit ambitions. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.